Straight ahead, border crackdown. President Trump declares a national emergency at the southern border, and changes are already in place in Texas. School choice battle. Texas lawmakers propose spending $1 billion in taxpayer money to send some students to private school. Democrats are promising a fight. Inauguration celebration. Some North Texans go to Washington, D.C. to get a front row seat to President Trump's return to the White House. Good morning, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts now. Hello and welcome to Eye on Politics. Another busy week in our nation's capital and the Texas capital. And we begin with President Trump's crackdown at the southern border and a number of his executive orders and actions that have already had an impact on the state of Texas. Among the measures taken, the president has declared a national emergency at the southern border. And as part of that, the Pentagon is sending 1,500 troops to El Paso and San Diego. And it's considering sending as many as 10,000 troops to the border. They will help build more barriers there, and the military is also going to be using its planes to deport migrants and use its bases to hold migrants. The White House press secretary released 2 photos Friday morning showing deportation flights on military aircraft have already begun. And the man who the president calls his border czar, Tom Homan, says Mr. Trump's emergency order has already had an impact. Homan said last week that the numbers of apprehensions at the southern border dropped to 766 in one 24-hour period. He says that's down from an average of 10,000 to 12,000 apprehensions in the same time frame. The Trump administration has revoked a rule by the Biden administration that kept immigration authorities from making arrests at sensitive locations such as schools, houses of worship, and healthcare facilities. The nonprofit group Children at Risk brought together advocates and immigration experts last Thursday, and they believe the Trump administration's new policies could hurt children and their families.
We're trying to tell folks, don't be scared, instead be alert. Make sure that you're seeking out those trusted resources so that you can inform yourself and your family.
Homan said immigration authorities are targeting the worst violent criminals first, those who pose threats to national security and public safety. And Governor Greg Abbott wants Congress to pay back the state of Texas billions of dollars that it has spent to make its border with Mexico more secure. The governor sent letters to congressional leaders and members of the Texas congressional delegation. He says he launched Operation Lone Star in 2021 because of the Biden administration's, quote, failures, and says that the state has spent more than $11 billion since then. Abbott is urging Congress to fully reimburse Texas taxpayers. And Republicans from Texas support this, including Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, who also praised the president's measures last week.
I think we will see a dramatic decrease in the people that will even want to come across the border. Remain in Mexico. The Border Patrol told us months ago that if you simply establish that one policy, it would cut down on the flow by 60 to 70%. So I am very positive that this will have a dramatic impact. So there are twofold, 2 issues here. One is to stop the flow, stop the bleeding across the border, and the second is the repatriations of the illegals that are in the nation. But for my constituents, for Texans, this is a return to common sense border policy across the United States. And make no mistake about it, this is national borders are what constitute us as a nation. If we're going to be a nation, we must have secure borders.
You spoke a little bit about, the mass deportations that President Trump spoke about on the campaign trail and yesterday, and he mentioned starting with criminals in the U.S. There are also a number of people who have been ordered to deport, to leave the country. So in your mind, is that the place to start?
First of all, yes, we have something like more than 10,000 convicted murderers in the United States today. That's exactly where we ought to start. And then the tens of thousands of lesser criminals, not murderers, would be an excellent second place to start. So absolutely, this is not mean. This is reestablishing our national sovereignty. And that is the issue. This is promises made, promises kept. This is exactly why the American people voted for Donald Trump, and the border was the #1 issue in most people's mind.
You have filed a bill, I believe, that would move the Customs and Border Patrol from Washington, D.C. to Texas. How confident are you that it will pass? And have you had any conversations with anybody here in Texas and even President Trump?
Frankly, the Congress has been all involved in getting through January the 20th. And this is the early stages of this bill. So we've had conversations with the governor's staff here in D.C. I will start working with my colleagues to see if this is going to pick up any momentum, but I expect it to. Because frankly, Donald Trump has said he'd like to move 100,000 federal workers out of D.C. So it makes absolute sense to move the CBP to the front lines, because that's where the commander needs to be, at the front lines. And the front lines, frankly, in the United States today is the southern border of Texas.
There has been legislation filed in previous Congresses that would reimburse the state of Texas for the billions of dollars that the state has spent shoring up the border. Is that something you would support?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The federal government has been derelict in its duty. Because immigration, people that say it's a federal issue, they're exactly right. But in the absence of the federal government, in the dereliction of its duty by the federal government, the state of Texas has done what it could.
Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch opposes much of what the president has ordered.
Well, there's no dispute that our southern border needs attention. I mean, we can't have a free flow of people swimming the river and coming into this country via smugglers and in an illegal way. The problem with what he did is, by shutting down that app, for example, those are people who were trying to come here in a legal process, people who had waited 6 to 8 months for an appointment to come to this country legally. And so that really decentivizes folks for illegal immigration, which I think is very disturbing and unfortunate. And it also applies to not just people in Mexico, but, for example, folks in Afghanistan, people who worked with our troops hand in hand to be interpreters and other service personnel to really help our countrymen and our service troops while in that country. We're trying to get here so that they wouldn't face clear political persecution in Afghanistan. And so I think that just a wholesale shutting it down was too overbroad of an approach.
The other thing that he campaigned on and he discussed was mass deportation, starting with criminals and perhaps those who already have deportation orders. Let me get your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, we already have laws on the books about deportation if you commit crimes in this country, and I think the vast majority of Americans support that. But for folks who have been here in this country for 20 years, that have children, that have families, DACA students, and DACA kids, you know, it's just not a reasonable approach. And so I think we have to be measured and thoughtful in our immigration policy. We definitely want a secure border, but we have a lot of folks in this country who work to make this country function. You know, they provide a lot of valuable services and fulfill a lot of jobs that are necessary in our economy. And so I think this global, just blow it up approach is just not realistic. It's not reasonable. It's not thoughtful, and it's not prudent.
As you may have heard, Congressman Keith Self from McKinney filed a bill that would move the Border Patrol from Washington, D.C. to Texas. Where are you on that?
I'm a no on that. You know, we have centralized government. There's efficiency of process. You know, I'm going to be a member of Homeland Security, and I'm very excited about that. I was appointed to that committee. We have our organizational meeting today, as a matter of fact, so I'll learn what committees I'm going to be on. One of the committees I'm requesting is border security. I mean, I do think that Texans need to lead on this issue, and I look forward to being part of those discussions. But we have a centralized government. We have the agency heads all in D.C. so we can have clear coordination and communication within the various aspects of our government. And I think starting to spill that out across the country doesn't make any sense.
One more question on the border, and that is, do you support a bill that would reimburse the state of Texas for the billions of dollars it spent to shore up border security during the Biden administration?
I don't know if I would or not. Again, I'd have to see the language of the bill to see what it encompasses. But Greg Abbott, our governor, did a lot of performative spending down there for reelection purposes that really didn't make a meaningful contribution to our border security. If it had, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now. And so I'm not for wasting governmental resources for one politician's performance gain. And so we'll have to see what the real policy is about.
Congress passed its first law against illegal immigration of the session. The House and Senate each passed the Laken-Riley Act. It requires migrants accused of crimes to be detained by federal authorities. It now goes to President Trump for him to sign into law. It's named after a Georgia nursing student who was killed by a man who entered the U.S. illegally, committed a minor crime, and was released by local authorities. The Democrats who opposed the bill said it removed due process rights for the migrants. In his inaugural speech, President Trump said he plans to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. He said it's in an effort to eliminate all foreign gangs and criminal networks operating in the U.S. Sarah Jenkins explains in this week's brief.
The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 is a wartime authority that lets the president deport or imprison the citizens of a foreign nation. It was originally a part of a collection known as the Alien and Sedition Acts, which also made it a crime to speak, print, or publish, quote, false, scandalous, and malicious writing about the government. The Alien Enemies Act was enacted to prevent foreign espionage and sabotage in wartime, but has become best known for its use in the World War II-era Japanese internment camps. Under the law, the president can target people without a hearing and based solely on their country of birth or citizenship, including those lawfully in the United States. The law was designed to be used during times of declared war, and only Congress, not the president, has the power to declare war. However, the president doesn't have to wait for Congress to invoke the law if there is a perceived ongoing invasion.
Thank you, Sarah. A former North Texas congressman is now the new CIA director. John Ratcliffe was sworn in Thursday by Vice President J.D. Vance after being confirmed by the Senate. 2 other Texans are expected to be confirmed for cabinet posts: Brooke Rollins as Secretary of the Department of Agriculture and Scott Turner as HUD Secretary. Coming up, state lawmakers have proposed spending $1 billion in taxpayer money so some students can attend private school. Both sides weigh in when Eye on Politics comes right back. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. Now to the Texas Capitol, where lawmakers have proposed funding increases for public schools in the first drafts of the House and Senate budgets for 2026 and 2027. And they include $5 billion more for schools. And the Senate proposal would have all teachers receiving a $4,000 raise, with rural teachers receiving an extra $6,000 on top of that. This is National School Choice Week, and a budget battle over school choice may be on the way as lawmakers have proposed spending $1 billion of taxpayer money so some students can go to private school. We spoke with lawmakers on both sides of this issue, including Republican State Senator Kelly Hancock of North Richland Hills and Democratic State Representative and House Democratic Caucus Vice Chair Mihaela Plisa of Dallas.
Well, it's going to be $1 billion fight. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about taxpayer money, that's your money, that's our constituents' money, that has accountability to it, that has some oversight to it, that we know what it's going to fund. We have seen that in other states, these proposals tend to balloon after a couple of years. And so we're going to have to look into the nitty gritty of what this $1 billion is going to do for Texas children, because that's what this is about. Our kids going to be able to read. Our kids going to be able to do math. And we have seen that these ESAs or these voucher schemes tend to not have the return on their investment that they promise.
And so if you're going to be fighting it, because Governor Abbott has said he has the votes in the House, the Senate, we already know, is going to pass this. So you're looking for accountability measures. What else are you looking for as it relates to this? Because we saw a bill the last time that didn't make it. Of course, none of them did. Really emphasized low-income people having first crack at this. Is that something, if this is going to happen, that you want to see?
Well, look, we have seen specifically in Arizona that low-income families are not the families that are using these ESAs or these vouchers. We tend to see that higher income families have it. A lot of them are kids that are already in private schools. And so it's much more than, okay, is the kid, graduating on level? I mean, the STAR test is going to be big on this. Our ISDs have to implement a STAR test. Private schools, homeschools don't have to do that. How do you get to your private school? A lot of private schools have a fee onto transportations. Our local ISDs, you can just go grab the bus like I did when I was a kid. And so there's a lot of oversight that needs to go into giving your taxpayer money to a private school or a home school for that matter.
Jack, I'm glad to see at the $1 billion mark because, I'd heard numbers around 500 million, 700 million. The governor and I spoke a couple of weeks ago. And, my concern that I expressed to him is that, we've fought so hard for school choice. And, again, 13 years on the local school board, but I always felt like parents were best suited to determine the best education for their child. And so I just want to make sure that it's robust enough that we address families that are interested in school choice, but we also have to be careful that we don't make it so large that because we're just starting. And so we need to recognize that we're just starting this program. It's not going to be implemented until the second year. And so I think the $1 billion is a good range for us to get started in an area that hopefully we see grow in future sessions.
We also spoke with the Senate Education Committee Chairman, Republican Brandon Creighton of Conroe, and I asked him if he wants to keep bills for school choice and public school funding separate and not combine them.
We want to be very consistent in providing these separate bills, and the education savings account legislation, for example, will be its own bill.
Right now, the goal is to do separate legislation.
As we were consistent last session with.
There's so many different parameters when you're talking about these things. How many kids are you looking at? Who's going to be, is it universal or is it going to include homeschool? Is it going to be targeted towards low-income people?
Right.
Et cetera. And the list goes on, accountability standards. So where are you on this?
We will have an education savings account that takes care of special needs and free and reduced lunch kids first. It will be a fully universal bill. We don't know that applications will exceed available revenue. We don't know how many students and families will apply for these education savings accounts. But last session, what we offered as a universal bill would have served less than 1% of the students in the state, yet public schools cried foul and took it as an affront and an attack on the sticks and bricks of public schools across Texas. That was absolutely a ridiculous manufactured narrative. In every state, including Florida, that school choice has been implemented, public schools got better. So we have a very good plan ahead of us.
How confident are you that this will pass?
Very confident. It's about the details, of course. I think this bill, again, will be universal. It'll be bigger, faster, stronger, better funded, will serve more students. And I think the House and the Senate will be surprisingly aligned on the bones and the structure of the bill itself. We'll always have details to work out. But with many faces and many new members, I'm going door to door to find out their preferences. And that takes a little bit of time here at the beginning of session.
On Friday, Creighton and 8 Senate Republicans filed their school choice bill, SB 2. It's a fully universal plan that would give students $10,000 and more for students with disabilities to attend an accredited private school of their choice. This issue remains a top priority of Governor Abbott's, and he called the $1 billion price tag, quote, an excellent start. Coming up, some Texans got a front row seat to history in Washington for President Trump's inauguration and parade. When Eye on Politics comes right back. President Trump is only the second in history to serve in 2 non-consecutive terms, and Texans were among those who celebrated Trump's inauguration and the start of his second term.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Pageantry. Patriotism. and partying, all on display in Washington last week as President Trump entered office after making a political comeback.
It has lived up to the hype. Absolutely. It was exciting.
The energy is something this trip that I've never seen before.
Erica Hatfield of Rockwall and Marcia Strickler Watson of Austin traveled to the nation's capital to get a front row seat to history. They attended the rally and parade for the president after he was sworn in.
You know, he has already put in a cabinet of very, very strong leaders. I ran into a few of them today, actually, and I look forward to seeing the changes that they make.
She and Hatfield say they are counting on the president to deliver what he promised during the campaign, especially when it comes to border security.
Deportation for Texas, that's really important, right? Is the criminals, deporting the criminals back to where they came from.
But aside from the history, they also came for the fun.
What girl is disappointed going to a ball?
Celebrating for America, celebrating the president, celebrating the new leadership, the change.
A friendly reminder, you can watch all of our full interviews on our YouTube channel. Just search CBS News Texas and click on the subscribe button. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. I'll see you next week, and from all of us here, have a great Sunday.